Welcome to the Spiritual Ninja podcast. I'm really happy to spend this time together. I'm very interested in hearing about you and your work. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
So one thing that I love about these conversations, first of all, personally, I get to have such an incredible, well-used time with people as far as having heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul conversations. And I think there's a lot of, it's easy to get confused in any field, but I think spirituality can be a very confusing field. And I think some people get super airy spiritual and they're not grounded. And some people think spirituality is not practical. I don't have time for it. And so there's two main premises on this podcast. One is that we're all individuals. There's one spirit and there are many paths. So
Absolutely.
To realize that whatever your way is, my way, anyone's way, there's more similarities than differences. And then also that spirituality is very practical. So I would love if you look back of when you consciously started a spiritual journey and if you remember that time period, like maybe what provoked it. And then if you look at your own internal spiritual path, if you could share your journey, practices that you currently do or have done that have been helpful and kind of bring us to where you are today on your own internal journey.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. I think my journey early on when I was a child, before indoctrination into the four R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, and religion or institution, it would be, I was fully alive with all of my senses and I was entirely present. And I experienced truly bliss from head to toe. There was a sense of beauty that I saw as if they were memories of heaven. So I had very early experiences of an interconnection that was embodied, that wasn't a mental piece, but was truly connected. And I was also given the gift, which during my life has also been somewhat of a curse, but seeing in another being their perfected state or their essential goodness. And I would be somewhat surprised if I discovered that wasn't there, etc. And so then as I proceeded on, and I was a Italian mother and a Swedish father, and I was a baptized Catholic. And I remember going into the church with the stained glass windows and the candles, seeing all of these faces of the saints in their illuminated bodies. And I felt like I was at home. I felt like, okay, yeah, I get this. So I had a very positive experience as a child of I would say, the Catholic rituals that were very much introspective, mystical in nature. And then as I grew up, and this was just in a small little, city outside of Houston, Texas. And then my family moved to New Orleans. And that's when everything really shifted. And I became a professional musician. And in many respects, kept all of the ritual practices, the institutional practices, I just put aside. And I just connected deeply with nature and the rhythms of the earth. And I played in this wonderful band, and we wrote our own music, and we recorded, and I was a recording artist as well before I met this band. And I moved totally into music. But I would say, even then, when I look back on the discography of a number of my recordings, Jonathan, that they were always about the path of love. Always about the path of love. Even when I go back to, I had a recording artist's name when I was with Columbia Records, Shane Martin. All the songs were about love, and they were with, sometimes full orchestras and whatnot. It was, my heart was just open, even though I was 16 years old.
Wow.
Everything was about love. And it sort of has never really shifted out of that, to tell you the truth. But then I had a deep experience on one of our travels with my band through the United States. I started reading the novels of Hermann Hesse. And I said to myself, when I was reading Das Glasspiel, The Glass Bead Game, Narcissus and Goldman, Siddhartha, what am I doing? And I had this vision of myself being successful as a recording artist down the line and playing in some theme park, and just felt very empty. And I felt the calling to the spiritual life again. I was Catholic, so I said, well, I guess it's a monastery. So I entered a monastery where I learned the practices of monastic meditation. And I was a monk for seminary and monastery together about 8 years.
Wow.
And there I learned the disciplined practice of meditation in action, ora et labora, prayer and work. And there was no time but the church bell that would be ringing.
Mm.
And nature was this exquisite place. And I remember in my early journey as a novice, I had this experience of the transparency between nature and
Mm.
and from that point on, I began to identify more with who I call the garden monks rather than the church monks. The garden monks were the beekeeper and the monk who was tending to the forest and tending to the farm. And I began spending more time there than I did in the church with all of the vestments and the priests and all of that.
Uh,
So that formed me very, very deeply. And of course, I wrote music, and I do have I recorded an album, a CD called Time of the Harvest, where I documented those experiences of the mystical life as a monastery, having experienced the journey of love in solitude.
mm.
And so I can say that was an important part of my life. And then leaving that as I got older, I went into doctoral studies, psychology, philosophy, and spirituality at Emory. And I did an integrative doctorate in the more psychological aspects of, I wanted to know what were the positive aspects of neurosis and psychosis.
Mm.
I just didn't see them as pathological
Very
because I
interesting.
said, if we look at creativity and the creative life, that a lot of the pains and anguishes that we experience mentally and emotionally can be put into a song or into a piece of architecture or into a beautiful life of loving others. And so I went on this path of study, but it was only after the academic life that I came upon a yogi, and this opened my life. One could say it was postdoctoral studies,
Oh, yeah.
but all of a sudden it was the psychology of the East. And it was deeper forms of meditation, although I learned the monastic form of meditation, which in itself was very beautiful, which is a whole other topic we could spend a lot more time than we have today. But when I began working with this beautiful, wonderful, lion-hearted soul, Dr. Thomas James Hickey, I began to then study the yogas. He had been in the inner circle of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and was the dean of his philosophy department many years ago, but eventually left Maharshi, and Maharshi blessed him because Tom was going to even be, his path was universal, perennial wisdom, and not to make any one way too overly precious.
Mm.
And so when I connected with him, that's where he was in his maturity. And he introduced me to the martial art of Qigong that he had learned from his master, Li Wang, and Li Wang had learned it from Wang Xiang Zai, the World War II master. And this was almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
And so, in working with Thomas with Qigong, Qigong, we Westerners have problem with exactly how to pronounce it. I'll pronounce it any way you wish. This has truly transformed my life because of the integral way that this martial art Qigong presented. I only wish I could have learned it when I was a monk,
Mm.
Jonathan.
Yeah.
I think I would have been much more embodied. And as you were saying in the beginning, and when we go into meditation, transcendence, we can go into transcendence, but not really be grounded in the body and grounded in the earth. Or we can be all about practical life and we get overly horizontal without the vertical. We can then be pretty much superficial and unconscious, but how to build sensitivity, nuance. And that's where I translate over the years in my 30 years or more of practice. These insights have been coming up, Jonathan, about
Mm.
Jing and Qi and Shen that connect for me now that I've studied the Vedas, the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, etc., as well as the Tao Te Ching, is this notion of Shen as the supplemental, eternal world of forms. And as it moves down into Qi, upper Dantian moves to the middle Dantian, Qi is the subtle, the energetic, the nuance, this wonderful, it's where the veil of the material begins to blend into the energetic. And
Mm.
then Jing is that material manifestation of the vital. And now all of that is flowing from earth to heaven, from heaven to earth. And one of your wonderful meditations in your just delightful book that I picked up before our day today, because I was, well, who is this Jonathan Hewitt? I want to find out who he is. And I saw this book and I said, well, this looks interesting. And then I opened up the pages and I went, this is lovely.
Oh, thank
It
you.
just, you get the essence of what all of this means to this entering the flow of the energy. My sense, it moves initially from heaven to earth and earth to heaven. It moves from the causal, supplemental to energetic, subtle to the material, and then flows back.
Hmm.
And the goal is to become one with this energy. But what I have discovered is one day, because I had studied Aikido for a few years, and so I really liked more Hayushiba, and then I did Tai
Hmm.
Chi for a year or more with a master's student, but then Qigong took my heart.
Hmm.
But it was this deep experience of this integral way that is possible when we also bring this experience that might be individual and then connecting with nature to opening the heart.
Hmm.
And Morahai said it in Abundant Peace. There's a place, and I'm sure you know that book backwards and forwards. It was one of the first martial arts books I read. But both in Japanese and Chinese, yes, it means harmony. When he became more mature in his 60s or 70s, he said, I was love. It's
Hmm.
love. So the energy of love. And there's this form in the 17th form in my tradition that actually, I don't think it was Montauk Chia, but one of the masters that are still living today, just it's taking this love and it's bringing it first, of course, the fresh chi from
Hmm.
heavens, breathe out stale chi, right? But doing that practice for a minute, but bringing all the way up to earth and then letting this elixir of love go all the way down the body, then letting the cosmos, allowing consciousness to expand, to embrace the universe and to know that you and me, we are, it's more than brothers.
Yep.
We're these reflections of this light, these rays of the one light, and nature has no problem with that.
Hmm.
But human beings, we have to sort of relearn how to be natural, and that's what I
Yeah.
really picked up in your book. Especially, I love the 3 Bs: the body, breath, brain exercises in each. You have give some wonderful exercises in those, and I think they're so practical, so useful, and so important.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I love everything you're sharing. That's one thing I've shared this a lot on this podcast, but in my life is that everybody wants to feel love, even if their way of getting there may be very confused or even you can say deranged or something. Still,
Yes,
at the end of the day, if you say, well, where's that going to take you? Where's that going to take you? Eventually they're like, well, then I'll feel loved or I'll love. And just to get back to that simple understanding as humans, we all want love. We all want to feel love. We all want to give love, have that interplay of love. It's not
it's
even
so
giving and
true.
receiving. It's just like this natural lovingism, whatever. And it's just this beautiful exchange. And so that's one thing that sometimes I'm like, wow, we all want this. And there's all these different religions and practices, but really when you throw it all out and you say, okay, what was it? Like, I would love if you're comfortable sharing, like, let's say if you look at being a monk in the Catholic order and then to where you are today, in the end of the day, like when you said monastery meditations, I'm guessing it was something with the 3 Bs and nature or something. Like there's only so many things that we can use, right? That we're given. So how does that practice of connecting to love, how is it different than what you do today, which I know maybe more embodied, like you were referring to, but just so somebody can understand on your journey doing all these different practices, what were the essences of the practices that you kept seeing?
That's a beautiful question. I can say that, looking here and then being here and then looking back. But I was introduced, I had such gifts from mentors when I was a monk. But I would say the first was there was a woman who had come from Oxford to teach Eastern mysticism, Eastern Catholic mysticism, sort of the Russian way of the pilgrim, the Jesus prayer. And she had come right when I came as a novice. Dr. Winkler, Gabriela Winkler, came from Oxford. Okay. She was German. And I began taking her classes, but then doing tutorials. And she told me one day she had been initiated by a starets, a Russian sage, into the prayer of Jesus, which now I know is Guru Yoga. Is the yoga of the name, whatever that name is. It could be Ram, Krishna, Buddha, right? But this was Yeshua. And she initiated me into the Jesus prayer of bringing the energy, the vibration of one of the names of God from the mind into the heart and then into the body and repeating that in alignment with the rhythm of the breath.
Hmm.
And then as a monk, when I would go out into the earth and work, I would just say the name and breathe the prayer. And it was this sense of presence, of this meditation of just walking and being with the earth, experienced more with nature for me, because
Uh-huh.
and with those monks, I would say those garden monks who were quiet, they didn't do a lot of talking, they didn't do expounding this and that through sermons, but I watched them and I felt them, Jonathan, and I knew that they had it. They had it.
That inner smile, right? That inner giggle.
So I think I carried that, but it was just a blessing to have. Who knew that in a monastery of males that I would meet a woman who was a professor, who was more of a mystic and a saint than most monks, and that she initiated me into the true mystical path.
Beautiful. Very, very beautiful. It's interesting how it's the feminine energy often that for men, especially if we were like, dudes, men, like that type of thing, to realize that we've got to have that feminine in our heart to connect to what we want. We can't will our way into it. There's a settling into a vibration that is different than willing it and doing it and making it happen. And I think it's a relief in a way once you realize as a man that you can relax into your heart and it's stronger than the doer. And it gives us more of what we want that we're trying to get from doing the doer. And then when you just rest, you're like, wow, this is the love I've been looking for in a partner, the love I've been looking for in all these actions I'm doing. And it's just
That's
here.
powerful.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is the strength. And of course, that's that yin, right? Pulling in and going out, the strength of relaxing. When you're saying that, to me, the most incredible experience of the feminine and masculine together in nature. I'd love to hear you on this. But the image that comes to my mind, and all of these images continue to wash over me in these years of my life from living with Qigong. And that is that the wave of the ocean, of this yin pull, this incredible pull, this strong pull, and then the moving forward, that when you said the strength and relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
and that you've learned, and I would love to hear you on this, is what has been your experience, because one can't do Tai Chi or Qigong without learning of the harmony and the flow
Mm-hmm.
of the feminine and masculine, of yin, yang. Could you tell me about your
Yeah.
growing in your awareness and experience?
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm going to share it from two perspectives, one from the meditation and then one from the body, because it happened to me at different times, but today it's integrated. Growing up as an athlete and a martial artist and a wrestler and having more tendencies toward anxiety and OCD, even though I wasn't aware of that. And in a high performance community I grew up in, there was always some kind of angst of accomplishing to get validated without being aware of that's what was happening. But that was my operating system of like win, win, win. So you get validation so you can maybe feel okay inside and not feel insecurity and fear. So I wasn't conscious of any of that, but that was the operating system that I was living by. And then when I was introduced to another way of living and coming from a different place inside, meditation gave me an experience of knowing myself as something bigger, deeper, grander than my psychology and my insecurities and my fears. And that became my new identity much of the time of I am this place of rest inside. And from the place of rest, I feel the strongest and most adaptable for anything in my life, mentally and emotionally and spiritually. The physicality part, I was still teaching martial arts that were, some of the arts could be seen as softer, like jujitsu or different things, but I was doing them in a hard way, even though I was teaching the gentle way on the inside. We were doing hard martial arts. And then back in 2006, I met a Sistema master, which is a different martial art that you spoke of, the ocean. When I went to wrestle him, I was very confused because it literally felt like I was wrestling an ocean. There wasn't information for me to control or do anything to. It was just confusing, but beautiful and powerful. So that moment I knew that way of moving was more powerful, more natural, healthier. And so once I started integrating meditation with that way of movement, it all got very integrated. So for me today, using the 3Bs, the body, breathing, and brain, as we mentioned before, it feels that it just takes a moment to calibrate the three of them to be in rest. And in the rest, on every level, I feel the most powerful. And even just like with wrestling or martial arts or anything, my body and my brain and my breathing and my spirit are like the ocean or like a tiger, where you're just ready and flowing and powerful. And
Mm,
there's this
mm,
relating to life from life instead of trying to push or pull or get someone or
mm.
get something. It's just this isness of the openness of the feminine, but it's like opening up a curtain. Like the curtain is like the feminine's like, just open the curtain, see what's behind it. And you open the curtain and you're like, oh my God, like this is the true strength I've been looking for with acting outside of the curtain. But once the curtain gets
Mm.
opened, it's, oh, this is the real show, the real play, and somehow being introduced to that. And from that, my life is completely different because it's me as my reference point of the moment in love responding. And if something comes up, it comes up, and that's just all part of it. But knowing myself as that place has completely transformed my reality.
But that's powerful to have that teacher that shows up when you're ready. And I do believe there is a factor, isn't there, Jonathan, of longing,
Mm,
of your
hmm.
searching.
Yep.
It's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears, the old saying.
Mm, yeah.
You were longing for this, you were wanting this, and all of a sudden you experienced embodied chi.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
the image that comes to my mind that teachers use sometimes is a water hose
Hmm.
full of that water. And if it doesn't have any channeling, that's just going to be going all over the place. It is strong.
Hmm.
But when that is channeled in a human being, they become for the first time natural.
Yeah.
As you were saying, these animals, these wonderful animals you were talking about, and the way your body was moving, even embodying it, it's this
Mhm.
natural wildness that's not chaos.
Yeah. No, like a lot of times, even though I've had injuries and I just turned 61, I truly move better today than ever. And it's because of this way of movement. And I feel a lot of times like my body, I know it is water, but like actually experiencing it as
Experiencing.
water and moving it instead of I used to move like a stick, right? And two sticks bending. And now there's all this freedom that
Mm,
feels like freedom in the body. And I used to just think meditation or spirituality was freedom from all of it, but now realizing like no, this body is an incredible gift to celebrate in a very deep meaningful way. And so I'm very thankful that I didn't get stuck at just like the witness meditative spiritual perspective. That is like, no, there's a reason that there's a physical form, and let's
that is
celebrate it
right.
and use it in the wise way.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, in the East, one of their essential teachings is it takes a long time in the evolutionary process from the elements through fish and animal and to eventually to become a human being to get this body, this jivatma, this embodied soul. And we've earned it over many, many lifetimes to get this body. And this body is appropriate no matter about its limits or challenges as we go through life, injuries, etc., genetic propensities, etc. But karmically, we get this body, and the body can't wait to be filled with spirit.
It's right on.
Can't wait to be filled
Yeah.
with spirit, and spirit can't wait to be embodied. Spirit wants matter, and matter wants spirit. The great
Mhm.
longing, the two great lovers is matter and spirit and matter.
It's
And
beautiful.
energy is spirit. And that love piece starts from the beginning. As
Mhm.
Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit priest of many years ago, in his cosmic experience, saw, he was also a paleontologist, so he was very connected to the earth. And he saw that there was love in gravity, that
Mhm.
gravity was the lowest. So, and
It's
as one
beautiful,
moves up
beautiful.
through the evolutionary scale with attraction and reproduction and the duality, but the duality that is good polarity, shall we say,
Mhm.
that magnetizes and energizes is love.
Mhm.
And then
Right
that
on.
love has many forms and be distorted, right? And irritated, just as irritated yin and
Mhm.
irritated yang. Irritated yang can be rage, and
Mhm.
irritated yin can be passive aggressive,
Mhm.
ardor, etc. When we get into those thought forms that pervert love, but as love continues to move up the chain of evolution, and then eventually the soul takes over,
Mhm.
which is for me. I've been talking perhaps about the soul today, but the soul consciousness But the two
Mhm.
ingredients, awareness and love, higher
Mhm.
awareness and love,
Mhm.
eternal,
Yeah.
timeless. And then when we keep taking these bodies through lifetimes and the soul unfolds, so then you have the whole job after we get the evolution of consciousness to evolve now through the unfolding of love and awareness of
Mhm.
consciousness.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying. I'm going to ask you a question, but I just want to say when you said love and awareness is funny because from the get go, my daughter's 14. I've always said to her, like, if anything, she'll ask me a question or, oh, I'm sorry, I did that thing, whatever. And I said, well, you always know my answer, always starting with love and awareness. That's like literally what I say. It's every
Mm,
answer starts with love and awareness. I don't care what the question is. Love and awareness is the best starting point to do that, whatever the topic is. So I love that you're saying a very similar thing, the exact words. I
wonderful.
mean, literally, I say love and awareness. Like that's
Wonderful.
my,
God,
that's
and that
my,
she's
yeah.
able to, not to step in your words, but I'm just saying, God, how lucky that she is able to have you as this mirror of, I believe, of a man who has all the parts working, and that this will surely help her in her life as he chooses a partner.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too sidetracked in that because I want to remember my question for you. But I want to say one thing. I've mentioned this many times, but two of the most humbling things. It's the same, but it's my wife and daughter have been to realize that in hindsight, being the quiet gardener would have probably been a little more impactful than being the preacher in the church at home because I was living it and I was being an example and I practiced this. They would definitely tell you I walk my talk, but I talked it too much for them. And it was a beautiful thing to realize that my passion for it also can impose it on somebody in a way that they may not be asking for. And to realize that being the quiet gardener a lot of times is the best thing to do, that the reference you gave, because you feel it and you see it and the words don't interfere unless it's truly in the moment of, wow, this is really being asked for. And
Yes.
if I don't say it,
Yes.
I'm like, I'm lying. But
Right.
imposing, right? Imposing is
Right.
a beautiful
But,
sensitivity.
but it comes with the territory. A
Mhm,
teacher once told me that a parent rarely can mentor,
mhm, yep.
and that it's the job of the child. And I have three children who are now in adulthood, but it the parent parents and the mentor opens worlds. It doesn't mean that the parent can't be the mentor,
Mhm,
because sometimes that can indeed happen if there's a karmic connection
mhm,
between the parent and child that will include
yeah,
mentor in
yeah.
this lifetime.
Mhm,
I have seen. But often the child just pushes against.
mhm, yeah.
Oh, dad, oh, mom, you're
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
pushing against
totally.
it. They grow through pushing against.
Yeah.
In my book, Meditations for the Soul, I talk about these stages of the seeker. One
Mhm,
beginning from the just someone that seeks, but only seeks for their own pleasure. And then the second is the questioner, and they seek by rebelling, by saying no, you're pushing
mhm.
against.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that would be the sort of adolescent stage, shall we say, of the
yeah, yeah.
seeker. And then the wanderer that just wants to experience everything in an open way, is no longer saying no, but yes.
Mhm,
But the wanderer will be a bee, going from flower to flower unless they become what I call the aspirant or the student. Getting
mhm,
seated, as the Buddhists say, is necessary for maturity. Getting seated in a practice, the sadhana, right?
mhm,
And then the aspirant or student can then become basically you, the way you're expressing your life to me. And that is integrated. When you bring all of those forward to finally the traveler of the soul in a body, living the integral life, that's the path that can give such fulfillment
mhm,
and we can be of such good use,
mhm.
at least not do harm.
Yeah,
At least the harm that we can do hopefully can be reduced in that
definitely. Yeah,
path.
definitely.
Uh, you know, uh,
Yeah.
So that's wonderful, but please don't feel, because I think a child sometimes that's what they're supposed to do. They'll push against us. Oh, you talk too much. You're the and
Yeah.
all that, and they push against it to live their own life. But oftentimes, perhaps in years later, you'll even see where maybe something that you not only did but
Mhm.
said, wait, I said that.
Yeah. Oh, totally, totally. And I do want to be fair to her. When you say that thing about like the karmic mentor, I can feel that, no question, in a lot of ways. I think in hindsight, I could have been more sensitive with it, but she is a super sensitive, naturally loving type of person. And I think it's just a great training in relationships of be full, be yourself, be loving, and invite the person to be that in their own way and not think that I or anyone knows what someone else's way is. Because it really, I think each person, that was the question I wanted to ask you too. And, but I think each person has to find their way. And I think that some people may say, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in prayer. I don't believe in meditation, or I believe in prayer, but not meditation, or meditation's the way, not prayer. And they have these differences in their mind. And if you were to forget all the different names or religions and things like that, and if you looked at your internal journey, one of how do you learn to connect to the deepest thing in who you are, which we can call love right now, or awareness or consciousness. And
Yes.
then how do you also deal with the things that come up that seem to blind you from experiencing that as yourself? I do think each person has to find their way, but there's also certain practices and teachings that you may feel like, wow, these are some really universal teachings that I think could help people learn to internally connect and also to deal with internal challenges.
I have seen universal threads that have moved through the religions, whether it be Christian mysticism, Hebrew mysticism, the Kabbalah, Taoism, the Vedas, Upanishads, Sufism. There are these thread beats on one string, but I have seen how are these universal, psychologically important tools that can assist the soul, because we have these filters. We have what the East calls sanskaras, or imprints from past lives. And these imprints, these impressions, these habit patterns we bring with us, and it's part of evolution. It's not a bad thing necessarily. There are, difficult ones, and ones that help us, that open us to love, and ones that block us to love. But I think how someone can grow, shall we say, one of the first steps of maturing in terms of this ensconced ego of that seeker, of just the gratifying of what I want now. And I think one has to begin, as you say, first learn practices of how to relax, which I teach in my practice, and you as well as yours. Just the, tension release forms of connecting with body and sensation, deep breathing, and intervening on the mind noise. I think the most direct way to intervene on mind noise is sensation and the senses, the five senses, whether it can be hearing, sight, taste, touch, smell. And so that is a great method that at least can intervene immediately on these thought forms of worry, of fear, of even anger. The next piece, I think, is very much is sort of letting the world be, letting conditions be. The Stoics understand that perfectly well. The ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, etc. Divine reason, that is karma. Everything that happens is supposed to happen. It's how I comport myself whenever things happen, which will happen. How do I comport myself? How do I work to not emotionally dysregulate? How do I work to not be judgmental? To accept the world, to accept self, and then begin to say, okay, what is useful for my well-being and what isn't? What works for me? What really doesn't? What works for you and those with whom I live, and what doesn't, in terms of creating disharmony or harmony? So I use in my book, Meditations for the Soul, this AIR, air, and it works all together. It's kind of cute, AIR. I mean, it's not really sequential, but the A would be attention. Attention is settling the mind in the core, not here, in the core with the breath. Intention. That's very powerful. It's taking responsibility for my energy, taking responsibility for the quality of energy that I take in, or, good chi, Dao chi, and what I give out to the world, taking responsibility for that. And having this sincere commitment, this will of deep sincerity that I am here now learning, always learning from the patterns, especially of nature, is the best teacher. Because I'm part of the nervous system of nature's evolution, and you, right? We as human beings. But if we don't go back, and it's not just to take a nice walk and see the sunset, it's really about understanding being students of the deep patterns of nature.
Mhm.
And that would be the intention. So attention, intention. And finally, retention, the memory of who we are,
Yeah.
never forgetting, assembling. And if we continue to remember, and never forget who we are, and that we are literally embodied beings of love and awareness on a path, and each of us have our own journey, from the specific to the universal, from the institutional to the cosmic.
Mhm.
And so everyone is where they are. And as I shared with one client, he said, but well, what about so and so and so and so? I said, look, say you're in fifth grade. You're not going to go to a first grader in class and go, you know what, you should be doing this. No, they're in first grade. Let them be. So we're all in class, we're learning. And then at the fifth grader, then we have to look and say, well, if someone's into senior, what are they doing? And they're in grad school, postdoc, whatever, because there's always going to be someone that can enlighten us, as that wonderful teacher was with you, and all of a sudden you were wrestling with an ocean. Oh my God, how beautiful is that? I mean, I think you will carry that, won't you, for
Well, yeah.
throughout your life. I mean, that's a peak moment.
Yeah, because going back to that gardener story that you shared, when I was there for a week of instructor training, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I understand the idea, whatever, this and that." But it was literally one moment where I grabbed his arm that was what I took away from that whole training. And then when he was here in Austin recently, we were at dinner together, and he kind of pushed me from the side just playfully, and I just kind of leaned into him a little bit, and he just nodded his head with a smile, and I did it to him, and he just totally let go, like this joyful smile, and almost like fell on my side of just showing how deeply physical you can let go. And
Mm,
he's a beautiful example of that because he's 67 and he moves from such a deep place of letting go and trust of the body. It's not like the mind. And so it's like getting the intelligence of your body. And that's so foreign for most of us today.
that's so powerful. The intelligence of the body. The body has
Yeah.
its own intelligence. I know I've worked with a Rolfer who is, she's amazing. And this idea, her whole teaching is the intelligence of the body. Well, what is your body saying? So what I want you to do, Neil, is connect your foot and the bones of your foot and the muscles. They're actually connected up here, everything. And I
Yeah.
want you to see that as one flow, and connect your spine, everything. All of your bones are connecting, and they're moving cellularly with all sorts of energy. Are you in touch with that?
Yeah. That's right
And
on.
you should close your eyes, be in touch with that, and hear what your body has to say.
Yeah.
In the same sense, there's an intelligence of the body, however. And again, I talk about in my book, Meditations for the Soul, because it was, in a sense, kind of a download of a number of years ago. And I'm still learning from this flood of insights that came through on the series of a few months. But there's also this sense of, yes, the body has its own intelligence, but the great intelligence of the body will never be known unless the soul, unless consciousness,
Yeah.
unless awareness and love incite it and enliven it. So the nuances, for instance, of smell, that is this sort of investigative aspect, the aroma of the divine, this vibration of positive energy. So when we walk into a room and we can sense whether there's sort of negative energy or positive, that's the spiritual, that's the soul's sense of smell.
Hmm.
And we can, in ourselves, how can I move from the negative to the positive? Take responsibility. Take responsibility for the energy that I take into my body and out, the path of energy, which is truly, to my mind, the path of the martial arts. It's the path of
Hmm.
energy yoga. And then there's the soul's sense of touch, which is empathy.
Hmm.
So if I truly can empathize and feel the other, the feelings of the other, that's a touch. I can touch them with love, touch them with affection. That doesn't actually physically touch them. That is something far more, has evolutionary possibilities, shall we say,
Hmm.
much more than just, shall we say, an abstract way, the intelligence of the body. And then we have sight, or actually hearing would be better for our conversation, attuning to the vibration of harmony,
Hmm.
because that to me is the essence of Taoism, harmonic duality. Attuning to that symphony, that interrelationship, that integral relationship between body, mind, and spirit. So the only thing I would say to the conversation of listening to the body, yes, is also we have a job, and that's to love and pour loving energy and awareness into the bones and blood. It's our job.
Hmm.
It's the soul's job.
I remember as a kid, my parents would call me Curious George. And once I got really into this kind of way of living, I like to try to peel away like the layers and get to the essence of things. And that's why I'm calling this the spiritual ninja, because it's like you're internally figuring out how to come from love, from awareness, from not purity, like being a good boy or girl, but purity of your soul, and to be able to navigate, because our brain is hardwired for survival as well. And so it does look out for problems and challenges way more than for most of us we need to. And so you have this going on, right? And then you have the whole infrastructure of how most of us live that is not the most natural way. And then you have the comparisons and all these things that trigger the survival system. So you have all that going on, but then you have a place of rest and home that's love and pure and beautiful and powerful that gives us everything we're looking for by trying to be safe and all those different things. And so learning to navigate and, like you're saying, harmonize or identify with the harmonies that feel more aligned with the deepest essence of it all, and the harmonies that feel that aren't giving you that same internal alignment, to be able to understand and see them for what they are and not pretend they're not there, but also not give them more power or being your boss, if you will, of how you live. And so I think being able to navigate in whatever way for each person, for some people, they may find it through a religion or whatever it may be, but to always personalize it so you feel like, wow, this is my Christianity or my Judaism or my Buddhism, in the
Mhm.
way that it's from your heart and your soul. And so it feels authentically aligned to you. So you are expressing, each of us are expressing our unique flower, but 99.9% of the unique flower is the same, but it just has that little difference. But to fully express that and to be aligned with that, I think is such an interesting navigation, because it's not like, oh, step one, you stand here, step two, you turn right. It's like, no, you feel your heart, you feel love, you feel presence, you feel awareness. Oh, your brain's judging, comparing. Use maybe a tool like you shared today. Use your senses to take your attention with your intention, to not feed that in yourself of the negativity or whatever it may be, and then to come back to loving is just a simplified
This
way
is
of.
wonderful what you're saying, especially look at the topic, the theme of what you're calling this wonderful conversation format of the spiritual ninja. I think of what are we learning? What are we learning as spiritual, shall we say, warriors? I mean, we're all coming to the world, whether we know it or not, we're going to have to learn one way or the other. But I think it's about learning flexibility and agility. So to navigate, one has to learn sort of where we begin and where we end, where something else begins and ends. And navigating the world is children, and then as we grow older, we then learn hand-eye coordinates and all of that. And some of us can be, very good with athletics or sports, and others martial arts, others music or whatever. But I think in terms of the internal agility
Hmm,
and internal flexibility and agility, those two things create
hmm,
the ninja dimensions of the spiritual warrior, because as long as with them goes strength, but not one dimensional strength,
hmm,
not dominant strength, but as we were talking about in previously in this wonderful conversation, that the strength of relaxing, the strength of taking in and then flowing out, and that agility and flexibility can create the ability to navigate circumstances with more poise and
hmm.
ease and more inner peace.
Yeah, right on, right on. You're sharing it so beautifully, and it leads to me to ask this next question about this is, once you start realizing, or any of us, that, oh, wow, I'm doing this, whatever name somebody wants to say, but let's use spiritual ninja. I'm doing this spiritual ninja on my insides, where I'm learning to adapt and come from love and awareness and knowing how to take care of the things that come up that may seem to interfere with that. And now I look at my life, and what do I do with my life? How do I live my life? How do I navigate the external world in a way that doesn't betray my soul, but also realize that for most people, we're not just living out in the woods, we're dealing with daily life. And so, how do you come from this place of the spiritual ninja on the inside from love and awareness and apply that to whatever your path is on the outside. Is there anything you would like to share about that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was just seeing a student before our hour here. It's a retired psychiatrist who's learning Qigong and learning meditation, etc. And we were just talking about how to bring his practice, how to bring the practice that we have. This, for instance, the natural breathing, nasal breathing, deep breathing, how to bring that into the world where you're stepping out into the world. And when you go out into the world, whether you're going to the grocery store or the office or whatever work you're doing, you're coming from a place of presence. Now, in the mind, it needs to be non judgmental awareness. We will get nowhere in the world. We will have no purpose that will be helpful unless we have non judgmental awareness. Non judgmental awareness doesn't mean we're not discerning whether this energy or that energy leans positive or negative, or this may be a potentially dangerous space I'm in. Their politics, shall we say, of every group after a number. One of my great mentors who's passed away once said, after 12, people, you're really in trouble in terms of politics. He said, so during his whole life, he passed away a few years ago. He was in his 90s, went through India, giving people wonderful tours. And I mean, he was incredible, endless amounts of energy. But one of the pieces was be in your sense of purpose, but not expecting to control others with what you are giving or sharing, but just be aware and be flexible with what you allow. And in fact, one of the techniques that I give for this in terms of being in the world, Jonathan, as a ninja, is a five senses meditation where you're, walking outside a park in the city, nature, doesn't matter. It can be as isolated or as dense as you want. Take 5 minutes or a minute, usually with new students, a minute, but 5 minutes with each sense. And what you do is you put that sense forward, sight, hearing, and the others will be present, but not, and you're just connecting with them in a non-judgmental way. So whatever you're seeing, whatever you're perceiving, and so you go through those five senses. They get more subtle as you get to feeling, because touch, you just more your heartbeat in your lungs and your feet on the ground as you're moving in space. Smell, it's much more about the nuances of, especially after rain, but it's also, feces of animals that are around, or if you're in nature, bear, you smell them, And so you go through the five senses, putting one in front, as the forefront. And then at the last sense, it's a symphony of senses. And one day I was having this experience, and that child I spoke to you about in the beginning of our time, that felt bliss from head to toe. There was no judgment. There was just presence. All of a sudden, those 5 minutes of each sense, and then opening up the symphony of senses, I experienced that wonderful, youthful being in this older body. And it was lovely. And I said, oh, okay, you're still here. So yeah, of
That was your
course.
returning that you talked about, right?
Yes, yes. Continual. And so to me, it's less of a what and more of a how. And one of my teachers was a monk, in fact. These monks were giving these techniques of monastic meditation. And this was Gabriella, in fact. And she came out in the seminar and talked about techniques are one thing, but it's all about attitude. Bring the attitude of deep sincerity. Bring the attitude of longing. Bring the attitude of awe, of humility. Everything else will work.
It's interesting how there's these different pieces. Like when you're in it, all those things are there. Like when you were speaking earlier, for example, about like our body is waiting for our spirit and the spirit's waiting for the body. The image I got when you were speaking was like this beautiful home and it's waiting for the person to come home to it to appreciate it. And then the
Oh, I love
person
that.
always looking for a home. It's like, oh, there's this beautiful home waiting for you. And so there's that natural thing that's happening. And then when you're in that, you feel grateful, you feel humility, you feel all those things, but it almost seems like maybe to come home for some people, the gratitude door in that moment's going to work. Or for some people, the purity door, for some people, the awe door, or for some, the devotion door. And all these doors take you into the home, the same home. But for each person in any moment, there may be a different door that serves us better. And to have the sensitivity to what door is the natural way in this moment, I think is a really beautiful spiritual
That's
ninja tool.
It's a beautiful image of here we are in our body, our physical age that we might happen to be, and it's waiting for everything to be at home. In fact, one teacher did share with me that when I was a monk and said Benedict, that was my name, Benedict. And the teacher said, rather than you wanting to feel at home here, why don't you make others feel at home with you? That's what a true monk does.
Very, very deep. When you say that, I guess on some level, there's always mutual things happening of how do I love and be present to you and empathize with you and serve you, but also how do I be aware of purifying myself within myself. So it's like you could just purify yourself by loving others, but also it seems like there's something about some attention of loving yourself, of putting it toward yourself, even though there really isn't a difference. It
It has
does
to
seem like,
begin there.
yeah, it
I
does
think
seem
it
like
has to
there's this
begin there,
play.
Jonathan, doesn't it? It has to begin with by purification. I interpret the word purification as refinement of consciousness. And that takes work, but refining consciousness through love and awareness. Easier said than done, but it would be, again, with my student in the last hour, basically said, is it very important that when you get that mind noise, that you give yourself, not only others, but give yourself first, non-judgmental awareness and love. And it's an act, it's an intentional act. Don't worry about, well, I don't feel that.
Hmm.
Because it doesn't matter what you feel. Because in reality, what we're talking about are states of being, not feelings. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi even said, he said, bliss, the feelings of bliss come and go. The state of bliss is a continual state of acceptance and evenness. So we cultivate that, we work on that, and we accept ourselves and our brokenness and our woundedness, in our limits, in our experiences of solitude that's not fulfilling but lonely. I remember I had just recently a student that was healing, and it was a real insight. Here I've been doing this for almost 40 years. This beautiful insight that came from her when because I was talking about solitude and healthy solitude, and she says, solitude? She says, when I'm alone, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what did I do wrong?
Oh.
I said, that's powerful. What did I do wrong?
Mm.
So we went in to heal that. So
Hmm.
we went back to that past moment that is present and awaiting healing, and given the light of awareness and love from her parent to her little child. And we did some of that inner child work of going there and being with that child that always felt that whenever she was alone, she was in shame and that she had done
Mm.
something wrong. So the journey of healing that is the ability to allow light and love to be at home with that your
Mm.
beautiful image of the self as the home that is awaiting to turn on the lights of awareness and love.
Mm.
And it's a journey. It's not linear. It stops and starts, and that's okay. The journey wasn't meant to be linear, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you're speaking, one thing that I've said this a lot in my life, but I forgot it until you just said that. To me, love and awareness is the goal, and love and awareness is the path.
Yes, absolutely. You're spot on. I think the problem is when people are often say to me, well, Dr. Neale, that's so far away. That's a goal that's out there. I mean, like enlightenment. I said, no, today is. Today is. It's a path that unfortunately the spiritual traditions, I believe, where they sometimes not failed because it was their fault, but because what comes to us came
Mm.
from hermits and people, etc., that these were more goals from someone that was already enlightened that was then teaching this path, that somehow enlightenment is this last piece or God realization or self-realization. No, it begins now.
Mhm.
Now it begins. I'm so with you on that. The path is the end and the end is the path. And I
Yeah.
think it's so important that we're here and now with light and love. As a Chinese master, I don't think it was Mantak Chia, it was another who was older. One day I was sitting in, a virtual seminar with him. It was so beautiful. He goes, so now what I'm doing, you think I'm visualizing when we're saying, fresh chi in and, stale chi out. We're not visualizing. No visualizing. We're actualizing.
Mm. It's great.
I don't care what beginner, student, intermediate, whatever. We're actualizing. And so
Mm.
I give that to you for your students.
Yeah.
It's about actualizing. No, we're actualizing. And all we have is now, and we must, the greatest teacher that I ever met in my life, Meher Baba from Pune, India, said we must make bold experiences with the spiritual life. No matter if we have partial knowledge, it doesn't matter. We must make bold experiments and with all of our heart. Don't
Hmm.
worry about failing. Bold
That's right.
internal
Yeah.
experiments. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it really is. Again, everyone, we're on our journey and we stumble and we do different things, but I look in hindsight and some things that who knows if I would have heard it or not at the time, but all of a sudden spirituality became a goal of enlightenment instead of a goal of being awake right now. Like it was something you're striving for. And I think today, what I see and feel and experience, and I think it would be the most direct path, I think, is right now in this moment, I'm going to practice love and awareness. I fell down. I forgot. Right now in this moment, I'm going to practice love and awareness. I got angry. Right now, I'm going to practice love and awareness. And by doing that, you create this muscle that becomes your new identity. And it's so simple. Yes, it's not always easy and of course feelings, things, whatever, but it's still in this moment, I'm going to practice love and awareness boldly, like you said. And that becomes your new I. And it
This
takes
is
care of
so
so
key.
much.
This is the first time you've said muscle. This is, I mean, you're so true. We have to build muscle. So just as we build muscle in a gym physically with positive tension, not negative, or we hurt ourselves. But I hear what you're saying is, how do we build spiritual muscle? And I would say emotional muscle. We have academic gyms for the mind. We have gyms to build the physical muscle, but the emotional and spiritual gyms are few and far in between. But yet, the whole world is. The whole world is actually an emotional and spiritual gym. We better get a grip on it and start, as you're saying. I love that. Love and awareness. I don't love and awareness. Forgive self. Move on. Flexibility. So flexibility, agility, building the muscle of being able to take some of that poison, just as an immunization serum, and we get stronger and we learn through, as the Italians say, failure is the mother of success. And if we get in that mind frame, we can almost immediately turn the negative into positive, the negative noise and negative self-talk of worry, of shame, of guilt, and all of this, which does no one good, and especially not ourselves. And we begin taking responsibility for our birthright. And our birthright is our soul, our consciousness, made of the ingredients of awareness and love. And we're on a journey, and it's a long one, and then begin to take responsibility.
Yeah. And like you're alluding to too, it's a long journey, but the journey is always now. So if we think about, oh my God, I got to climb up that mountain. And you're like, well, it's just one step right now, just one step.
Training, training, training. And see what I hear you saying, because you've trained, you're a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
You're training students, but you've gone through this huge process of training in your history of martial arts, which is extensive. But I love the language that you use, because it's really about that. It begins now, and it's moment by moment, hour by hour. And we rest, we train, we rest, we train.
In training, once you get a model that works for you, like for me, I don't sit there and think about it all the time, but love and awareness works for me and
Mhm.
authenticity. So once I have a model that works for me, then everything's training. Everything's training. Oh, I forgot I'm training. That's okay. I remember now I'm training, right? And so
I love
it's
it.
always
Yeah,
training, whether we're aware of it or not, we're always training something. But once you
that's
become
right.
aware of like, wow, using the name of this podcast, I'm a spiritual ninja with the goal of every moment practicing love and awareness and authenticity toward myself
Mm,
and everyone, then it becomes really simple. It's like, oh, right now I have an opportunity to spend this time with you. What am I doing? Practicing love, awareness, and authenticity. And oh, wow, I'm going to go teach martial arts in a few minutes. Okay. What am I going to do? Practice. I'm going to have lunch. What am I going to do? When I remember,
practice.
I'm practicing love, awareness, and authenticity, or whatever somebody wants to say. So I think getting something for each of us that rings so true for today of what turns you on, what turns me on, whatever the word is for somebody. I know one person, their word is balance. Like for me, balance doesn't sound as juicy to me as what we're talking about, but for them, it may be even juicier than what I'm talking about.
In fact, I have a new word, because I think balance doesn't really hit. It doesn't have the juice. You're right, but I do think rhythm does.
Beautiful.
And so
Yeah.
when we're talking about the ninja balance, no, ninjas don't. You don't care about balance. What a ninja does care about is rhythm.
Mhm.
Finding the rhythm, which can alternate depending upon our strength today, or tomorrow, or this hour, or that. And I want to add, you're right. Every moment, wherever you go, whatever you're doing, you're eating. It's a moment to train in love and awareness. You're alone, training for love and awareness. You're sick, training with love and awareness. But I would add an element that we haven't named yet, And that is when we're in the night and we're sleeping. We awaken at 4 in the morning, 3 in the weight of the world. We're at our most vulnerable place. Everyone feels the hour of the wolf. Scandinavians call
Hmm.
love and awareness. So as I'm laying down in that vulnerable spot of the most vulnerable moment in that night, breathing in and breathing out the name of the eternal source, love and awareness, rocking my child to sleep, my inner child, connecting with all of those who are suffering, having difficulty sleeping or in dying or being born or in accidents, and being in that moment of absolute surrender with love and awareness. That I think is, as long as our eyes are open, even our eyes are closed, but as long as we're
Yeah.
conscious and we're not in the God consciousness of unconsciousness of sleep.
Hmm.
Because the only difference between the God conscious masters and ourselves are that we only experience it when we're asleep, so we don't really experience it. So, so that's but when we're aware in that moment, just at that point, also I love your image of that unceasing opportunity to practice love and awareness, Jonathan. That's beautiful.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like I know I can talk, but I almost feel like, oh my God, like this has been such a beautiful, deep connection that it almost feels like we gave birth and there's nothing other to do than just to enjoy and bake in it right now. But I just feel so thankful that you and I have never met before. And I know people that listen to this may say, you always say this, but it's true. Like we have not met. And meanwhile, I just felt like we had this intimate, deep, soul to soul, heart to heart, joyful friendship connection that is so amazing. And I can't imagine anything more I like to do with my time than relate to people with love and awareness, and also within the love and awareness of how do we navigate things that feel like they take us away from that, and learning how to train so our love and awareness is more our identity than the challenges.
Well said. Thank you for setting the table, setting the stage, giving this wonderful environment for soulful conversation. You said heart to heart, yes, and soul to soul. And when we can have those conversations, we realize so much more of the similarities in our human spirit. Celebrate the differences, but those similarities are so key and so elemental
Hmm.
and so powerful. Yeah, I think the more we begin practicing love and awareness, the more we realize we don't meet a stranger.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said that, I had this visual of like this huge tree and it had tons of branches and the little, twigs off the branches with different leaves. And one leaf is telling the other leaf like, hey, I don't like you because you're this and you're that. And it's almost, I mean, I'm sure it's bigger than that, but the absurdity, if we saw two leaves saying that, like, I wish I was more red, you'd be like, dude, you're perfect the way you are. Right. But
Exactly.
we get, our mind tricks us to say that one leaf is a different from a different place, but it's from the same tree. So
So
it's
true.
very humbling and eye opening to realize how there's really no separation, just our idea of separation.
That is right. There's no separation. There is only our idea of separation.
Well, I cherish this time and I hope that we stay connected. I know just by having this, we have a mutual love and respect already. And then anyway, anytime it can be in this way or any other fashion, I invite that because I really enjoyed our time together and seeing your journey. And I always have a lot of respect for somebody that has just been on the journey for a long time and come out more purified of love and awareness, but also somebody
Mm,
that's willing to go through different schools, for example, the Catholic
mm,
tradition,
mhm.
and to feel that if you took something beautiful, but also felt that a next step for you was the most authentic step, that you had the courage to take that and then to reflect and keep reflecting to be, am I closer to love and awareness? And if the case is yes, then you know that you're expanding and not running from something. And I sense that in you very strongly.
Yes.